can escape from the past, never go chasing the dawn. Why don't you just release me and go your separate way? My heart has nothing left to give away. Another drink for my troubles, another cold cigarette. I'm not the type, but I'll take a bet. That flame will keep burning on as I go chasing the dawn.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Halsey Live. We got a fun show. We're going to be talking about World War II revisionism, the Eichmann trial, and all things in between. And I have a very lovely guest today. I have Mayim Chaya, who I've known for quite a while right now. She's quite the warrior for Jewish causes. She's an amateur historian. She's a journalist. How are you doing?
I'm good, Baruch Hashem. You?
Same as always. Where can people find you?
At Mayim Chaya on X. I'm pretty much only active on X. And you could find my writing. I have a column on fighting online anti-Semitism. I write every week about Jewish causes, online hate speech. Last week we did one on the Second Amendment and what it is. I think we did one about 2A. We also did one on free speech. The column's pretty new. We only have like 5 or 6 up, but yep, I have my weekly column, and then I sometimes drop some words on X. But you probably, if you've seen me before, you've probably seen me argue with Nazis, and that's why I'm here.
Well, it's been an interesting time, to say the least, for people like us who care about the truth, who care about the things that we're supposed to be teaching to our youth, right? Because we're in a position now where revisionism, and funny enough, it was Jews who tried so hard. They understood the past, and that history becomes rewritten as those who were there for the actual war, or whatever moment in history it was. As the people that were involved directly start to die, the revisionism begins. So as Jews, we tried to document everything. We have Yad Vashem, we have the Holocaust Museum in DC, we have museums up everywhere. We try to put it in school curriculums because we want to preserve this story so that it doesn't die with the survivors. And of course, it backfired on us royally because revisionism is everywhere, you know. And mm-hmm. I know you've seen it, and it's quite interesting. Milei, the president of Argentina, just opened a secret archive where everyone was always saying that it wasn't just Eichmann who escaped to Argentina, that it was Mengele. Some people even say Hitler did. But the archives of Argentina proved that not only did Mengele make it to Argentina, the government knew full well that he was there. In fact,
I believe it.
Yeah,
I believe it before. I've heard that before, but now we have proof of it. So
yeah, they not only knew it, they had all the details of it. They monitored him while he was there, and there were a couple requests for extradition, which they turned down because they called him a political prisoner. So, you know, it's quite sad that that's the way that these things turn out. But at least we know for sure now that that's not just, you know, wild conspiracy theory, that he was able to escape. He was able to change a passport and sneak into Argentina, where he died of old age, assuming, you know. But
so
last
my
night
grandparents knew. My grandparents always said it, and they're survivors. They were always like, Argentina had to have known he was there. There's no way that they didn't know. How did they not know they had a Nazi among them? It was obvious they were hiding him.
Right.
And don't get me started on the Austrian painter.
So I've seen a couple of like the interesting like Netflix series and stuff like that about that he escaped to South America. I don't know if it's true or not, and to tell you the truth, as far as history is concerned, it would be nice to know, but it doesn't change anything if he did escape there. You know, obviously that means he died there eventually, and it just
Right.
means the Soviets were liars, which I mean we've always known. You know what I'm saying? So it doesn't change that much if we find out that Hitler was also there. But there's I was in a space last night with Stealth, and they were talking about, because obviously with Tucker Carlson pushing the most revisionist history that he can, in addition to the Groypers and all these weirdos online. They were talking about a couple things, which I found interesting because I'm trying to like wrap my head around this new revisionism, and it's not just the stupid stuff like, oh, the gas chambers didn't have metal doors. It's like they're recreations. There weren't even the original gas chambers. Like everyone knows that. But aside from that, you go a step further, right? And they were talking about it on Tucker recently that, you know, we were the bad guys. We should have been fighting the Soviets as opposed to Hitler, you know, and that Churchill and Roosevelt got us involved in a war, and they kept saying without a defined American or British interest. And they leave out the part where Hitler declared war on us. You know, it wasn't like we declared war on them and charged into the European theater. We actually stayed out of it, the U.S., for a while. And Germany declared war on both us and Britain. So it's not like it takes a rocket scientist to figure out. It wasn't like we had the option of fighting Hitler or the Russians. It was that they declared war on us, and I don't believe we would have sided with Hitler over the Russians anyway, as we had been involved for so long, you know,
Right.
in Lend-Lease and all of that. And then they were talking about the trial in Britain, right, where David Irving was against Deborah Lifshitz, and the revisionists love to say that, well, he didn't have a very good lawyer, and he wasn't given access to good counsel and all of that, and they leave out the most important part. He sued her. It wasn't that she sued him and brought the full power of the Jewish legal talent on down to bear on him. He sued her over the revisionism. It's on him to provide his lawyer that's going to make his case. It's on him to have, you know, the story straight and not be able to just lie his ass off. And these things get left out to the point where it's almost absurd, you know?
I've emailed back and forth a couple of times with Deborah, and she's extremely nice, and she basically just said it's way more pervasive now than it's ever been, and she dealt with the Irving trial and everything. That was her thing. She's famous for it. But for her to say it's even worse now and to just keep fighting it, I mean, reading those words from her, that was like,
It's going to continue getting worse because, as I said, now the survivors are very few that are left. And over the next 10, 20 years, they'll probably all be gone. You know, and once they don't have people to directly contradict, it'll be down to the historical record, which these people love to change at will. You know, it's part of their inherent madness that they have, in that they want to have the Jews be responsible for everything wrong with the world. So in doing so, you ever notice they don't argue that Hitler didn't kill a lot of gypsies, or that Stalin didn't kill a lot of Russians or anything like that? They only argue that the only bullshit part about it was the part where he killed Jews.
271,000.
Mm-hmm. No, they love that statistic from the Red Cross, which, again, context, the Red Cross visited in the very beginning of the war, and they based that calculation based on how many they thought died of typhus. The final solution wasn't known to them at the time, you know. So it's nuts that they keep going with this harder and harder and harder. And with the advent of internet, you know, I called this from the moment Tucker left Fox News. For Fox News, Tucker was edgy. right? Like he was a weird voice in an area where people weren't very edgy. But for the internet, Tucker was nothing. So when he left Fox News, it was obvious he was going to have to change his style to adapt to an internet audience, which means going a bit bonkers. And finding financial backing in Qatar, obviously, it went the direction that it did.
Anybody who denies that he's bought by Qatar is just, they have their head up their ass.
Well, it's obvious. I mean, Qatar files FARA paperwork, and when he interviewed the Emir of Qatar, he was paid for that. Like it's just so obvious that it's. I don't even think it's like an opinion. Like it's pretty much been documented through FARA filings and that his backer is Malik. Like it's not a question anymore. It's more of just an accepted fact.
Right.
But with Israel in the news so often and Jews in the news so often, which sucks. But with all of that, it's an avenue for all of this denial and revisionism to come out, because people that think that Israel's doing something awful in Gaza are incredibly open to the idea that we've been awful all along and that all of this nonsense is true.
109 countries.
Yeah, 109 countries, which also isn't true.
No.
That's the hardest part about these groypers and all of them, is that their revisionism is not just so openly bullshit and easily debunked. It's that they just never stop. The bullshit just keeps flowing out of them, and that's why I don't waste my time like trying to argue with them and debate them anymore, because I realize that it doesn't matter what the truth is to them. You'll debunk what they say, and they'll just move on to the next talking point, and they'll keep going until they say something that you've never heard of before, and you go, "What are you talking about?" And then it's, "Oh, gotcha. Now you'll understand. Now you'll see the Jews are all evil because you didn't know this one weird point that I'm bringing up about the Talmud or something stupid like that."
I hate the Talmud trope. Oh my God, they act like it takes 7 years to fully study the Talmud, maybe more. And these motherfuckers, pardon my language, really think that they can read it in a weekend. And they really double down on it.
Oh, I know. I can't even tell you how many times I've been told, "Oh no, I've read the Talmud." "Oh, you did?" "Yeah, I read it over the weekend." It's like, really, all 17 books of it? Like, what? And trust me, I've been doing Talmud study for 15 years now, and I've only gone through it once, and I still don't know most of it. Like it's nuts that the idea that they think they can quote these things and get away with it, but they do.
They love to throw you out of context screenshots, and then when you debunk it, they tell you you're wrong. It's just modern day trolling to the extreme. They know they're wrong. They know exactly what they're doing. There's no doubt in my mind that they know exactly what they're doing. They're just doing it because it pisses off the Jews.
So I had one recently that showed me a whole list of Talmud quotes, and half of them weren't real at all. Like even the books they listed weren't real books. Like they were just made up out of thin air. And when I said that, the answer was, "Well, that's because Jews are allowed to lie to promote their agenda. So you're lying to us about the books that don't exist. So the reason we can't find them and quote them to you other than in this meme is because you're making up the fact that they don't exist, and you use your internet ooga booga and all of that to scrub them from the internet so we can't even find them." Like, I've actually had people say this to me.
My new favorite one that I know it's been around a while, but for some reason it was just brought to my attention, is how they get out of getting censored on X. This was just brought to my attention. They use hola hoax, hola bunga, anything to get under the radar of not getting reported.
Mm-hmm.
Well, too late. Found you guys.
It's been my opinion, though, that X isn't even trying to get rid of these people. Like, the vast majority of them, as long as they don't threaten violence, like, they pretty much can say whatever they want and get away with it. Like X doesn't kick them off for the stuff they claim they will.
I mean, if you're probably familiar with Rise of Rod. I
Name rings a
mean,
bell. Yeah.
that thing calls us kikes every single day. And it's still there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've reported that thing over and over again, and they won't take it down. And that's generally a slur. I've gotten those removed before, but certain accounts they just won't remove. Which Dan Bilzerian, Jake Shields, I know you know those.
Of course.
Yeah, those are the ones. Um, those should have been removed a long time ago.
They
But
won't do it though because the whole point of X is that they need the engagement. Without the engagement, their value is nothing. So they consistently allow for the most horrendous things to be said on X. I always say that when the leftists were in charge of X, we at least had to find ways to be civil because if you just said something like if you called someone like a retard or something like that, then they just kicked you off. So at least everyone had to pretend to be civil with each other and come up with new ways to talk to each other. But now it doesn't matter. Now you could just say whatever you want, you know.
yeah, I mean, I get called an oven dodger like at least 10 times a week, and 9 of those don't get removed.
Mm-hmm. So again, it's so interesting that we brought up the Mengele thing because I did want to talk to you about the Eichmann trial because again, this is one of those significant things that not enough people talk about. I think in that, in addition to all the evidence that they found in Germany itself, in addition to the Nuremberg trials, in addition to everything that's been documented, like down to the last detail, we caught Eichmann. Like long after the Holocaust, we caught Eichmann and put him on trial. He didn't deny any of it. In fact, he openly admitted that it all happened. He just claimed that it wasn't his fault because he was just following orders. You know?
I mean, and I hate to harp on it, but the Groypers, with their Holocaust denial, really seem hell bent on denying the Holocaust when one of their own, which is literally Eichmann, uh, it openly admitted that it happened. So it's really convoluted, and it's a cognitive dissonance that I can never make sense of. I guess you're not supposed to make sense of it. It doesn't make sense. But I mean, one of their heroes admitted that it happened, and there's still it didn't happen, but it should have, and there should have been more.
Of course.
Okay, should have been more. That means it did happen, and you're admitting that it happened, but it also didn't happen.
Right.
The IQ level is room temperature.
Well, it always was. And again, that's why I find this thing about Mengele so interesting, is because when the Israelis caught Eichmann in Argentina, Argentina threw a hissy fit that we kidnapped him and brought him out and all of that, violation of sovereignty, the whole nine.
Mm-hmm.
And they acted like it was such a shock that someone like Eichmann could be found in Argentina. And they even argued originally that they didn't think it was actually him, And then we find out that there were tons of Nazis. Like there was a huge German expat community in Argentina at the time. There were tons of ex-Nazis there, And you would have think under all circumstances that they would have wanted them brought to justice, but not even close. They could have cared less.
And I mean, I remember reading that the Mossad was they were also looking for Mengele in the early during the capture of Eichmann in 1960, and they prioritized the Eichmann mission over grabbing Mengele while they were doing their thing.
And then we find out that
they never actually
Nazis.
caught
There was a
Mengele
huge German
because they prioritized Eichmann, and I mean both of them were horrendous, and I just thought that was interesting that they had to pick one over the other. I mean, how could they even choose?
I don't think they I don't know if they had to pick one over the other. I don't think the Israelis knew where Mengele was. I think they knew where Eichmann was. There was the whole story about the blind woman who heard his voice. So I think they knew they had Eichmann and they had him dead to rights. So it
Right.
wasn't going to be a question of would they be questioned like whole hog about having Eichmann. But with Mengele, they would have had to scour, and especially after we took Eichmann out, right? The Argentines were very aware of what was going on, and they were on the lookout for us doing it again.
How do you feel about Brazil? I know Mengele died in Brazil,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it was 79 or somewhere around there. Could be wrong. I mean, and what did Brazil know? Do you think Brazil knew where he was
I think
at
there's
the
a good
time?
chance they all knew what was going on when all was said and done. But I think that there was a general desire, especially among South America, that World War II was over, the Nazis had been shut down, and whatever was going to be found out was going to be left to historians at that point, and they didn't want to be implicated in harboring Nazis or in being with Nazis or anything like that. So I think there was I know Brazil has issues, they always have, but other than their issues, I think that there was just a desire, you know, amongst people to forget about it, you know.
I love the irony that Mengele's skeleton is now used in SA med school classes in Brazil.
Is it really? I've never heard that.
Yeah, in my research for talking to you, I
Hmm.
found that they used his skeleton as a educational tool at the medical school in the University of Sao Paulo. What sweet
Interesting.
sweet irony.
Someone's just saying something dumb in the chat that whatever. Again, I can't prevent the like people from coming into the chat, so it's kind of like I see their stupidity come up, and it's just it's hard just to not just go after each one individually, you know. But then we would spend the whole show doing that. And you said you had a very interesting story about your own grandparents, which led you to a lot of this.
Yeah, my grandfather was a partisan, which I've talked about a lot on X. Um, my grandpa escaped Auschwitz right when they were during the first deportation, like the very first ish deportations to Auschwitz. He escaped and he stole some Nazi uniforms, and him and a few others shot the guards at the gate and
Mm-hmm.
ran for it. And they spent a while in the forest uh, near Auschwitz. They ran for it, and he him and his little merry band of partisans actually somehow ended up in Yugoslavia, transversing Yugoslavia, which is really far
Mm-hmm.
from Auschwitz, like incredibly far. And I know that they did most of it on foot. It probably took them like a year, probably maybe a little less, to get from escaping Auschwitz and hiding out, people harboring them, and then making it to Yugoslavia. I know he was in a Yugoslav prison for being a partisan, and when they let him out, he just went right back to being a partisan. And when the war, after the liberation, when the war ended, he ended up in a DP camp as a police officer, and he rescued my grandma. He went back to Auschwitz, where she was liberated from. He found her. He ran into her by accident when he was going back to find her. He found her on a death march, and him and the army, the I think it was the Red Army. I would have to ask a family member, but I believe it was the Red Army that ran into the death march and liberated them. And he took my grandma back to Czechoslovakia, where he was staying in a DP camp waiting for family, and none of his came back. She found two of her brothers, but nobody from his family came back. It was just him. So
I also have, and it was funny because I'll start from the beginning and tell the story. So my great grandfather was in Theresienstadt, and even after the war, he was a baker, right? Owned a bakery, and while he was in Theresienstadt, they put him in charge of the bakery and the kitchen, right? And he kept, because Theresienstadt wasn't a death camp; it was a work camp. He was able to keep a scrapbook, and he realized pretty early on that they would bring him like groups of workers, and then the workers would start disappearing, right? And they would just bring in new ones. So there were obviously rumors going around, and he understood that some of these people would probably not make it out of the war. So he started asking them, like, please give me something that like has your name on it, so if I get out of here, I'll be able to tell people that where you were, and maybe they could find you, or at least find out what happened or anything. And he kept this scrapbook with all of this in it, plus like some journal entries of things that he had observed while he was there. And when he got out after the war was over, and he made it here, he kept this scrapbook. He gave it to my grandmother and my grandfather, who kept it, and just they considered it more of a family heirloom than anything. And then when my grandfather died years ago, but when my grandmother died, my mother found it amongst her things, and said, this thing is getting kind of old, and it's going to fall apart, and we really need to get it to some people who can interpret the stuff that's in it. So her and my sister brought it down to the Holocaust Museum in DC, and it brought up two huge points to me, right? People love to argue and say, oh, it wasn't 6 million, it wasn't 6 million, why aren't we allowed to question the number? To me, I want you to question the number, because I don't believe it was 6 million. I think it was more, right? Because we still don't know how many people were killed, how many Jews were killed in World War II. We don't have any clue. And what cemented this for me was this scrapbook that we gave to the Holocaust Museum. This was in, hold on, I'll tell you when it was. This was in 2024 that we gave this to the Holocaust Museum, right? And they went through it, and they found out two things. The first, of the over 200 names that my great grandfather had logged in this book, there was like 180 of them that they had never heard of before. They had no clue whatsoever that these people like even existed, or what happened to them. They obviously had some records that these people existed, but they had no clue what happened to them, or where they perished, or anything like that. So we're still discovering in 2024 names of people that were lost that we had no idea were lost. And secondly, it was so ironic, because I had a debate with one of these idiots, right? And they sent this email to us like maybe 3 days before the debate, and I knew it was going to come up, because they love to bring up about how the Red Cross visited Theresienstadt, which was where my great grandfather was. And they said, it was beautiful, and the prisoners were treated well, and they had all they basically made it into a Potemkin village, right? So specifically, what my great grandfather had put in this book was because they didn't know this. How did you get all these prisoners to act all happy and joy when they're there, and to build it up and to clean the place up so beautifully so that it could even fool the Red Cross? And it turns out the Nazis promised them food, because they had all been starving on these work details. They promised them like an extra loaf of bread and a half a pie if they participated in this whole exercise. And my great grandfather documented this. And even again, the Holocaust Museum wrote to me. They said, we had no idea. We knew it was a Potemkin village. We knew that they made this, that they made up this whole scene for the Red Cross. We just didn't know how they did it.
So your family actually contributed to pushing the number beyond 6 million.
If the number in 2024 was exactly 6 million, now it's 6,180,000.
As of April 27, 2025, it is 6,200,000 to 6,200,058 to 6,258,484.
Right.
Blech.
Well, also I know
I
that Yad Vashem said that they're close to identifying. Like I think they've gotten to like 90% of all like the names that they've now been able to identify as actual victims and what happened to them.
There's
So,
a wall in the Holocaust Museum in Detroit that they change the number every time official stats change, the
hmm
number goes up. And so when I was there in on April 27th of this year, the counter was at about 6,200,000. So
and I again, it's going to keep going up. I mean, again, that was my what's it called? That was my mother's side of the family. My father's side of the family isn't Jewish. They're American from the 1600s. But as we keep going and as we keep learning more and more about the war, right? It really is kind of amazing the revisionism that comes out about it when it's been so researched and so well documented. And what's even worse is the bullshit that they throw. It always has some little basis where they can show that it happened, so they can lie about it, right? And one of the examples is they say the sign outside of Auschwitz originally said that 6 million Jews were killed there, and then it was revised down to 1 million, right? It was revised down because the Soviets reported that 6 million Jews were killed there. Completely, it was complete bullshit, and everyone knew it was bullshit. So they said, no, we're not going to allow this hollow ground to be used as Soviet propaganda, and they revised it down to where it was. But the original 6 million figure killed at Auschwitz was never taken into account in the official tallies. It wasn't that 6 million were killed at Auschwitz and then they lost 5 million. It was considered bullshit from the minute the Soviets first said it. It was never considered in the actual totals. And when you tell people this, they're like, "Well, wait a minute, I didn't know that." And it really is quite amazing that no one seems to know these things. You know?
you got some haters disputing you in the chat right now.
Am I? No, I don't care. It makes no difference to me. You know?
They another show on you.
Oh, God forbid. Like I care. You know?
Idiot.
Yeah, I don't even know where. I don't even see it. So I don't. I don't. Again, I don't. I don't care. I don't do this kind of stuff for them. I'm not trying to convince morons that believe this kind of shit, like that they're wrong. I do it because history is important. And knowing these things is important because normally it's not just used against us, it's used against our entire way of life. Like again, Tucker Carlson's revisionism says that America and Britain were the aggressors, that we got into a war that wasn't in the interests of the US or Britain, and that we should have been fighting the Soviets and siding with Hitler, which is patently insane. And literally, as I said, Hitler declared war on us. It wasn't that we declared war on him, you know. And without knowing these things, we're opening up a whole generation of people who, after especially after COVID, are willing to believe that just lots of it is just so, like, there's so many different stories that you can't believe any of them, right? And that's specifically what we want to avoid. We it's not just that we want to tell people what really happened. It's that we want to be able to confidently show people that it's not just a case of two opinions, each one coming up with a different, conclusion. It's that what they're saying is just patently false. It's just flat out lies.
Have you had a chance to visit the evidence room exhibit? Has it come to a show, a museum near you?
So honestly, I've only been to the Holocaust Museum in DC once, and I went to Yad Vashem, but I didn't go through the whole thing. I just kind of walked in and looked around and left. I don't find it necessary to go in and relive it in my head. Like it just upsets me,
Right.
and B, I wind up like being pissed off for weeks. So
Makes sense.
I grew up with all the stories. I grew up with what happened. Like my grandfather, my great grandfather, when he was put into Theresienstadt, He had sent my grandfather on the Kindertransport, and my grandfather's brother went with him to Theresienstadt, and they evacuated him to Auschwitz, and he died. He was murdered, right? So I grew up with the stories, like, and again, I have so many friends that have told me their stories that it's I don't find the need to go to the museums and learn more about it. I would rather check out the scholarly research, because as I said, when I visualize it in the museum and I hear the people crying and all of that, it makes me so enraged that like I can't shake it. So
I mean, I brought documents. If you want me to share my screen, I actually brought documents. I have documents from Yad Vashem about my family members, but honestly, like you're absolutely right. We don't need to prove anything to anyone, but I
mhm.
have them.
But in a sense, I feel like we do need to prove something at this point, because again, when you have people like Candace Owens, who has millions of followers, even though I don't believe that she has any real influence on anything, I think she's just a typical internet crackpot. Same thing with Tucker Carlson, although Tucker seems to be the golden goose for some reason. Like I don't understand why people like Trump and Don Jr. and TPUSA and all of them, like, why they go so far to defend Tucker Carlson, even though the stuff he says just keeps getting more insane by the day. But at the same time, I think it's more important that we keep bringing these things up and explaining these things to people, like, as opposed to just going like going whole hog against it, because that revisionism is just going to keep getting worse because it works. Like, again, with Tucker, it's more obvious where his funding comes from, because as I said, he reports it. But
Exactly.
a lot of these guys, it's not like they sat down with someone from Qatar and Qatar said, "Hey, we'll give you $10 million if you yap on about this for the next 6 months." But they know where their bread is buttered, right? Like when they do a live stream and they get no donations, no super chats, because they're talking about how evil Muslims are, and then all of a sudden they turn it to how the Holocaust never happened, and all of a sudden their donations and super chats and subscribers go through the roof. They understand what it is that they talk about that gets them paid, and what it is that they talk about that gets them nothing, right?
I like to pull out this book every time someone argues with me because
Mm-hmm.
it's 880 pages and I've read all of it.
Okay.
And when I pull out this book and I asked, well, have you read this? When I argue with a Holocaust denier, that usually sends them scurrying back into their abyss.
Mm-hmm.
I can get rid of them real quick with this book.
Well, tell us about it.
It's KL. It's a history of Nazi concentration camps. It
Mm-hmm.
literally gives a breakdown from their planning in the early 30s all the way up to the liberation. Basically, there's a breakdown. It breaks it down into how Dachau was originally a camp for political prisoners. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't originally meant to be a concentration camp. They housed political prisoners there. And then once they started doing deportations, those political prisoners were resentenced to the Jewish ones were resentenced to having to serve another term there. But the second terms that they spent there were far worse than when it was just camp for political prisoners. Um, there's an entire index in the back that gives actual sources, really tiny print, but actual sources to every single claim the author makes in the book,
Mm-hmm.
where you can actually fact check him. There's about 100 pages of just citing yourself. Oh my goodness. This is Winifred.
Hello, Winifred.
Go down. Interested in Holocaust history. I raised her well. So it breaks down all of the scientific experiments that happened in various camps. It has actual photographs recovered from the Nazis themselves. These cannot be faked.
Mm-hmm.
This is real. It explains the crematoriums like down to a science. And no, they did not cram 6 million bodies into crematoriums. That's
No.
just that's the most fucked up one that I've heard. Well, how the 6 million cookies and 6 million ovens and 6 million my ass. So it gives a really good explanation of how most of the bodies were actually never recovered. They were just chucked in mass graves, unfortunately, and that made up the bulk of the deaths. Auschwitz was the most efficient, supposedly. It was the most efficient crematorium. Also, Auschwitz, it broke down how Auschwitz was the only one that actually gave tattoos. No other camp that prisoners passed through did the tattoos. So that's why, again, debunking it now, there were not 6 million tattoos, and the only 5 numbers trope doesn't work.
Right.
Because 6 million didn't pass through Auschwitz.
So my friend Andy just wrote in the chat too. He said there needs to be a booklet. A lot of deniers talk about ovens and how long it takes. Again, it's another one of those things where you take a reality and use it to twist it into fantasy to make up your own narrative, right? Today, if you're having a body cremated for burial or so that you can have an urn of ashes, then yeah, there is a time that it takes to put down one body into the cremator into the cremation oven, cook it and turn it into ashes and then take it out. But they're not trying to do it efficiently to make it A, as fast as possible, and B, to make it more than one person. The crematoria that were built at Auschwitz were literally industrial size ovens, and there's been again exhaustive work on this that shows how long it took them to burn how many bodies, and in addition, they burned many of them in huge pits, right? That were just burn pits, and again, it's that modicum of truth where they say, hey, a modern cremation system takes X amount of time, therefore it was impossible for the Nazis to do it, is so ridiculous, you know?
There was actually a great breakdown of it. Well, great, I can't, that was bad wording. But for explanatory purposes, they explained it really well in the movie The World Will Tremble. I talk about this movie a lot. It's partially the partisan story and partially an explainer as a reenactment. It's a drama, but I would consider it a horror movie, of how the initial executions actually took place in boxcars using, I think it was carbon monoxide. And they just
it was originally done in mobile vans. They turned the exhaust into the van so that it was carbon
that's what I was
monoxide
getting
blown.
at.
Yeah.
And they explained it, and they show the bodies from those vans just being dumped into the burn pits. And so there's no way to keep track of those. We didn't, I mean, our family members that died that way were not cremated in the crematories. That was just, so there's no way. Oh my goodness.
It's okay.
This cat.
Well, someone in the chat brought up that there's also a recent show on called the Devil's Confession, the Lost Eichmann tapes, and then someone else pointed out that confessions under duress are useless, and I would agree that confessions under duress are useless. But Eichmann didn't deny what happened. He wasn't under duress when he denied it. In fact, he was fine admitting to it. He just said it wasn't his fault. So how could he be held responsible for it? He had no problem admitting to all of it. You know, like it's just the way that it was. It wasn't under duress where he had to confess to it. And also remember the Wannsee conference, we have the notes. We know what was decided there. We know how they decided to exterminate the Jews. We know exactly their methods. We know all of it. We have the copy of the Wannsee conference notes. So again, and there's literally hundreds of other documents, but at the same time, again, it's taking the one thing. Okay, well, was Eichmann, when he confessed, was it under duress? No, he didn't have a problem admitting what happened, and that came out both at the trial and in when they talked to him before, and that was basically just accepted. He was fine saying that it happened. He just said he was just following orders, and therefore, he, as a soldier, couldn't be held responsible. That was his defense. His defense wasn't that it didn't happen. He was fine with admitting that it happened because he was the one who did it. He was just the one who said that it wasn't his fault because he wasn't in charge.
Well, you've got an influx of haters all of a sudden.
We're talking about something, you know.
So,
Yeah.
my grandparents were at the Eichmann trial. They sat there front row with other survivors and watched him smile through it. He enjoyed what he did. He never denied that he did it. He didn't deny that it happened. He just denied that he was a mastermind of it. And I think that tells you everything you need to know, that he was smiling about it. There are photos from the Eichmann trial where he is sitting in the glass box smiling. He was happy.
Because the job that he didn't consider it like it was an achievement. What he did with precision as a soldier. And he considered it that it wasn't that, you know, as a soldier he did something horrible. It was as a soldier he followed orders and did it so well that it was done. That's why he was smiling. That's why he was happy. And someone just wrote in the chat, bullets are cheap. They are. But they addressed this at the Wannsee conference, and they said that shooting POWs and shooting Jews and children and women was hell on morale. And it created a problem in that you can still only you still needed one person to shoot each person. Even if that one person went down the line and killed however many people his magazine held, you still needed a person to do that, to gather starving people into a mass gas chamber. Didn't take hardly anything, especially since a good 99% of them had no idea what they were walking into. They thought they were going in to take a shower. So the efficiency of bullets was far from efficient in terms of what they were trying to accomplish. Andy says, the British bugged SS officer POWs talking after the war. They talked about the mass killings in Operation Barbarossa, early invasion of Russia. 3 million were gunned down by Einsatzgruppen. Again, we know that, you know.
I mean, every day at Cell Up Hell, they only really needed one. They only needed one officer to. I mean, at that point, everyone was so weakened to just herd them into the gas chambers. At least at Auschwitz, every morning they would do Cell Up Hell, and every morning my grandmother survived it. But I mean, my family was lucky. Most people were not.
No.
I mean, just our existence as Jews. I mean, I had a chat with Hillel Fuld the other day, and he said, Jews are a miracle. I agree. Just our very existence. When so many families were wiped out, the Jews that survived are an absolute miracle. We are amazing.
And again, like, this is why I don't typically argue with these people. He says they were so psychotic they set up that horror show, but they were too soft to shoot some people. No, they shot millions of people. That's already been documented over and over and over again. It was decided at the Wannsee conference that it was too inefficient, and that it wasn't meant to be done. It wasn't made to be done on an industrial scale, and the bullets were needed for the war. Every bullet they wasted on a person was one that wasn't being shot at one of the enemies. So they came up with a much more efficient and much more sterile way to do it. And it's like weird that people would he calls it Muppet logic. Like I don't understand how people can say stuff like that in good faith. So I'm just assuming he's not saying it in good faith. No. You know, because it's impossible to use that kind of logic and say it out loud and really believe that people would believe that, unless you think people are that stupid.
I mean, people don't change. The granddaughter, I think it was the granddaughter, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, of the biggest Zyklon B manufacturer is now a pro-pal.
Oh, I know. I mean, I saw that. She inherited her wealth from the war. and from everything she did in the war and her family did in the war. And then what do we get?
We get the
Pro-power.
grandchild screaming in the middle of the street about the Intifada.
Well, that's the hardest part of all of it, is that when all's said and done, the Palestinians at the time, the Arabs that were in Eretz Yisrael, right, were active associates and people that wanted to be part of what Hitler was doing. The attitude has just went further, and nowadays there's no difference between the Palestinians and the Nazis. The only difference is what they're able to accomplish, right? You see, the Germans didn't have an enemy that shot back. They were able to disarm them and make sure they couldn't shoot back, right? But the Palestinians don't have that luxury because we do shoot back, you know? That's all the time we've got for today, Mayim, and I have had a blast. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to do another follow-up on this. Okay.
Awesome. Have me back whenever. I'm down to come back and debate this again.
Gladly.
I have more books.
We'll definitely have some more people for sure, and we'll get together and do this again soon, guys. Thank everybody. Thank you all for turning up. I really do appreciate it. You can donate to my Patreon, which is in the description, or go to halseyenglish.live for instant donations. I'm looking forward to talking to you guys. I have Chaya Jones coming on. She's an ex-Pussycat Doll, big MAGA supporter, big Israel supporter. She's coming on to talk about the work she did after 10/7, and she will be here Wednesday at 11. I've got James Lindsay coming on next week, and we're doing some shows with Tommy Corrigan and Tom Luongo and EM again. Looking forward to all of this and can't wait. See you guys in spaces. Until then, have fun, everyone.
Bye.
My fellow Americans, tonight I am speaking to you because there is a growing humanitarian and security crisis at our southern border.
In all honesty, a border wall or steel slats won't work. But great bodies of water will separate us from the horrible Mexican rapists. Introducing the 2019 Trump Great Border Moat. Stocked with the most aggressive penis fish, incredible man-eating alligators, and unbelievable genetically modified moose-cocked rape dolphins, as well as flying, migrant-eating sharkfish. So incredible.
I swore to protect our country, and that is what I will always